Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a very little kid, I wanted to be a farmer. And then I went through a phase of really wanted to be an astronaut. I was adamant that I was going to be the first person on Mars, like adamant. And then when I had to actually start thinking about it, I wanted to be a doctor because that's what everyone at school wanted to do. And then when I found out that wasn't going to happen, I wanted to be I studied zoology and I wanted to go into research.
Okay.
In zoology.
Yeah. How far did you take it then?
I got a research master's, and then my life went a little bit wonky, and I ended up doing what I do today.
You're listening to Series 3, Episode 14, and to my guest Tom. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 28th of May 2022. Hello, loves. Tom is a clinical trials data manager in a university clinical trials unit, the coordinator of TransLeeds, and a celebrant. He spends his days looking at numbers and making sure the trials are running smoothly, his evenings running support groups and doing advocacy, and his weekends doing weddings, funerals, and coming-of-age ceremonies. You can find out more about TransLeeds at transleeds.org. Like, share, follow, and subscribe to this podcast. I'm doing all I can to bring this to you. So if you do like anything about it, please follow and promote the show on and off social wherever you can, whenever you remember. Please give money to this show and please give any feedback, questions, or comments that you may have. Email workinghourspod@western-studios.com or use one of my social channels to get in touch. Links for all of those will be at the end of this episode. Now, please enjoy this totally free and totally ad-free, as far as I know, episode of Working Hours with Tom from TransLeeds. What is it that you do now?
So my kind of main job is I'm a data manager in clinical trials at a university. I've got a couple of little side projects as well. I do celebrancy on the side, so like weddings and funerals and all different things with that. And I also am the coordinator for TransLeeds, which isn't a paid job, but it is still a full-time job on top of the other stuff. But yeah, like I say, my main job is being a data manager.
Yeah. So how did you get into that?
Well, when I was doing my master's, my dad got quite ill. He got cancer and he ended up passing away just after I graduated from my master's. And I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be able to pursue the research that I wanted to because I just wasn't in a position to do that with the way everything had gone. And I saw a data entry job going in a clinical trials unit, and it was on cancer trials. So I kind of thought, well, it's just data entry, but it's a wage. It's money that's going to be coming in, and I'll be doing something cancer related, so it'll feel a bit like I'm doing something worthwhile.
Yeah.
And then 5.5 years later, I've ended up being a data manager in exactly the same place. Different trials, but same unit.
Yeah. So should we go into how you got into the other roles then?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. So, did you kind of pick them up one at a time or did they both kind of happen at once or what happened?
That's a good question. What order did they come in? I think the TransLeeds stuff started when we were in the first lockdown, I think. Okay. I just before the first lockdown, I figured out that I was trans and I started leaning on the community to get support and to figure out what I needed to do next. And I wanted to pay that back, so I started volunteering with TransLeeds. I volunteered as the outreach officer for I guess about a year, or maybe a bit longer than that. And then when the coordinator before me stepped down, he asked me to take over that role.
Yeah.
So that's just the day-to-day management of everything, making sure that all our projects are happening and making sure that our volunteers are kind of happy and have everything they need.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I guess that's how I got into that.
Yeah.
And then the celebrancy, I've I've always been interested in I guess ritual and ceremony and how we can incorporate that better into our modern lives, because it's something that used to be, we didn't even used to have words for it because it was just part of everyday life, like back in history. And now we don't really have any ceremony or ritual in our lives at all. And I find it, even if you don't have any religious beliefs, it's still, I think, really valuable. And so I've always kind of been, if people wanted something doing, I'd give it a go, and I'd help people with ideas they've got if they wanted to mark an occasion. I'd help my friends out and my family out and stuff like that. And I ended up kind of formalizing that, I guess about a year ago. I started doing it a bit more professionally rather than just like when things came along. Just because it's something I enjoy. And if you start doing it professionally, you get to do it for more people.
I mean, was it something you were aware of before you started doing it as well?
I guess not, because the kind of celebrancy I do is very broad. You get a lot of people who just do weddings or they do weddings and funerals. Whereas I will do anything. Like it says on my website, like, I could do weddings, I can do funerals. I'm really interested in coming of age ceremonies. I'm interested in celebrations when people come out as trans, because obviously that's relevant to the community I'm part of. And then anything else people want to celebrate as well. It might be, they might be getting a divorce and they want to mark that occasion. Or they might be becoming a parent for the first time or the seventh time, or a grandparent, or I've had a couple of people approach me recently who have like kids who are coming up to puberty, and there's particular like changes in their life that they want to mark as they go through puberty. And like, why not? Why shouldn't we? Well, I was going to say celebrate, but that's not always the right word. Why shouldn't we like recognize that these things are happening and like take a moment to just sit and reflect on it? Often that's a celebration, but funerals aren't particularly happy, but they're important parts of the process of dealing with a change in your life.
It's dedicated time, isn't it? At the minimum, it's right. We're going to sit down and you have to have time where you actually sit and think about this.
Yeah.
I mean, your mind can drift off. Mine's always drift off, but because you don't get that kind of space. I suppose it's kind of in line with all the mindfulness sort of stuff as well, of like, being present.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose that is a big part of it, is just noticing that something has happened rather than going, maybe you've got someone who's just turned 18, and rather than going, okay, you've turned 18, you're going off to uni now, or you're going into a new job, and that's kind of done. Having an afternoon where the whole family sits down and goes, what is important about this particular point in this person's life? What can we do to kind of notice it and support them, maybe support ourselves, whatever that particular group needs. It's nice to just have that time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nice to be able to go in and sort of share a thing with other people as well, to do that from your position.
Yeah. I mean, I am so honored anytime I get to do, regardless of what it is that I'm doing. It's a big responsibility, and I always get a lot out of it as well. even working with people that are complete strangers that I'm never going to meet again. It's valuable time for me as well to sit down with people and see what is going on in their lives and see how I can help improve them or help them improve it themselves, I guess, because I'm usually just doing what they want. You know, I have a lot of input into like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But ultimately, I'm doing what they need. And, it's very, very rewarding.
Cool. So with the TransLeeds role, so you started with outreach. So what was the outreach? I mean, you know, you're obviously not door knocking in a role like that. So how did outreach work? Was it just sort of being visible in particular spaces, or like how do you get the word out?
Well, when I started, obviously it was in lockdown, so we weren't going to any events. We weren't seeing our own kind of service users either. So I focused on outreach to other organisations. So building up better links with other members of the LGBTQ community and other local organisations. You know, speaking to the council and the NHS and addiction charities, domestic violence, homelessness charities, anyone I could basically to kind of go, TransLeeds are here. If you have anyone that needs support around, you know, if they're trans, if they're non-binary, if they're anything under the kind of trans umbrella, point them our way. And if you need any advice, we're here to help you as well. And yeah, just getting our name out there a little bit more.
Yeah. So, and then moving from that role into a management role, I mean, was that just sort of, you've already got management experience that you're being paid for, why don't you do this role? I mean, were you kind of whisked into it, or sort of, was there a current dragging you in there, or was that something that you wanted to do for yourself, or how did you get into the management position then?
That's a really good question. How did I end up doing this?
You looked away for a moment and then,
yeah,
managing now.
I think, I suppose I do have some, nowadays I definitely do have a lot of management experience. But to be honest, I think the most valuable experience I've got has been through the TransLeeds stuff, not necessarily through my paid work. But I did have experience from work of, you know, managing staff and managing projects. So I guess that is maybe why I ended up being coordinator, but mostly it's because I don't think anyone else wanted to do it. And and I was fool enough to go like, yeah, I'll do it. But when I took over the job, the previous coordinator does still work with us, just in a different role. And he said multiple times, like, this is a really stressful job. And you need, you know, everyone is going to come to you with all of the complaints they've got. And it's going to be hard work. So don't go into this thinking it's going to be great, because it's not. It's going to be a nightmare. And so I love it. But it's definitely a challenging role.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's one that you can do for a long time? I mean, are the rewards enough that you can keep going, or is it kind of like you do a few years and then you need to sort of do something else?
I think it probably will be that, you know, you reach a point of burnout and have to pass the mantle on to someone else for a bit. I mean, I'm being very pessimistic there. TransLeeds is great. I love TransLeeds. You know, I'm doing that work for free, so I must like it. We're a community that is facing a lot of difficulties from every side, it feels like, at the moment. And we're a community that does need a lot of support, which is why TransLeeds exists. But it also means we have a hell of a lot of work to do. and we've got a limited we're a very small community, and the people that volunteer for us obviously are a much smaller subset of that community. They're the people that have the time and the inclination to work for free to support other people. So there's a lot of challenges to getting everything running smoothly. But it's all going very well, as much as I'm complaining about it.
I mean, the complaints are kind of, they're sort of obvious. Like, I mean, they have to be there because, I mean, the whole thing's been ridiculously politicized. And, that doesn't make anything any easier where you're actively just trying to help people. And then, you're being sort of targeted or scapegoated essentially in particular areas. That doesn't help anything.
It leads to a lot of, like, when I first started working for TransLeeds, I thought I'd just be helping people with transition stuff, like changing the name or accessing healthcare, stuff like that. But it's so much broader because people aren't just trans. They're, a lot of people are trans, and therefore they are homeless because they've been kicked out or because they haven't had the same advantages other people have had who aren't trans, or they're trans and they, I don't know, I'm going to start making this sound like a sob story now, but the intersectionality is a massive part of it. We do a lot of work with people who are in precarious housing or have been made homeless, or people who have other health conditions, but because if you're trans, it's hard enough to get healthcare. If you have other stuff going on as well, it's nigh on impossible. And a lot of people that are unemployed or on in really precarious work because it's hard to get hired if you're openly trans. On top of all the other stuff, you might be, unemployed and openly trans, and then you can't get housing to work for you. So then you're also homeless or staying in shelters or sofa surfing. And like, it's just a snowball that you start thinking like, oh, I'll just get people some, an appointment with the GP to talk about stuff. But no, it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, like, how are you on stats and stuff? Are you sort of immersed in stats from the work, or?
I should be. I'm not, but I should be.
I mean, I'm thinking as well. I mean, if people are in work already, and because some people will have specific ideas of what a trans person is, or when a person transitions, or how it happens, or whatever. But I mean, people transition at any point in their lives, don't they? So people could be in work, they could be in families, they could be, and change later in life, and that can have all sorts of kind of knock-on effects. So I'm kind of thinking here in terms of, if you knew how many people who were in work and then came out as trans, like what the rate of retention there was, like how many people sort of lost their jobs and stuff.
I wish I knew that, because that would be really interesting. We do have a lot of, we call people service users, which I'm kind of going off as a term. Maybe members would be a better word. But we have a lot of people that come to our social groups, come to our support groups, who are kind of figuring out that they're trans in their 40s and 50s and are like navigating coming out of work and working as an older person. And it's definitely tricky. But I don't know. Now I kind of want to go away and ask some people, like, do you think that did you lose your job, do you think, because you came out as trans? Or do you think you would have got that promotion if you'd kept it quiet? Like, it would be an interesting question to ask, definitely.
Do you know the employment stats for sort of out trans people? Is it?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah. But
No.
did they have that kind? I mean, is that information even kind of collected?
There will be stats out there, but I think a lot of it comes from the US rather than the UK. And obviously the situation over there is different. So it can be difficult sometimes to go, well, you know, in America, 80% of trans people are employed, but is that the same in the UK? I don't know. That's a number I've just plucked out of thin air. Yeah.
So I'll go back to kind of lockdown. I like to kind of start with basically your journey into lockdown and take you back to sort of your memories of what you were doing at the time and what happened and how your work kind of changed. So when we went into lockdown, the first lockdown, did you, was it just go work from home? Were you furloughed straight away? Like, if you were working from home, did that mean that your workload increased massively, or what sort of effects did it have on your work? And are there any of those effects still sort of ongoing?
The first lockdown was really weird. I wasn't furloughed, but I was managing just one person at work who was eventually furloughed, but it took, because we work for a university, it took a long time for those wheels to kind of turn and get decisions made as to what we were doing. We were all sent to work from home, obviously, because of lockdown. Nobody had ever worked from home before. Some of the senior management was sometimes allowed to do a day or two here and there from home, but the vast majority of us had never worked from home before. And we were working in clinical trials, and all of the trials I was working on at that time were cancer trials. So they were all running out of NHS hospitals, which were not, capable of running, doing all the stuff we needed them to do because COVID was happening. So we all just kind of twiddled our thumbs for a few weeks, to be honest. Like, there was a lot of we were told to use the time for training and to use the time to prepare for things that we might need to do in future while we've got a bit of spare time. But
prepare.
Yeah.
Prepare for what? What's happening? just prepare. I mean, but that was the thing as well, because there was no, because of all the uncertainty, it was kind of like, well, what can I do? What is there any point doing anything? Like, when does it need to get done? And
yeah, because we had no idea when our trials would be starting up again, if they'd be starting up again, what state, the NHS would be in a couple of months' time. It was really quiet chaos. Like, everything was unraveling, but nothing was happening. It was, not a great time. But I got a lot of time just sitting in my back garden, so that was nice.
You're largely working with data by the sounds of it in that role. So was it just easy to do everything from home once the work started happening again?
Yeah, my job was pretty easy to transition to home working. Our trials unit was massively behind technologically compared to lots of other places. So we were still asking nurses in hospitals to fill things out on paper and post them into us. And then we would put them into our database. Most other, certainly commercial trials units, don't do that. They just have the nurses put it directly onto the database because it's 2020. We have the technology. So we had to do a lot of changing it so that was possible. So going from, we need a team of however many data entry clerks doing all this data entry, to we need a load of people working on the database to get it ready to send to, nurses and other hospital staff or other medical staff. So that was interesting. We suddenly had, when that process was complete, we had a lot of, I'm deliberately not saying which university this is because I'm probably revealing more than they'd want to here, but it felt to me like there were a lot of data entry staff that we now didn't need. So when people were leaving, everyone was very happy and they weren't being replaced. But to the credit of the unit, they did also give a lot of people promotions so that the staff that wanted to stay could still do useful work, even though we didn't have the data to enter anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we ended up losing too many data entry staff because we'd forgotten that we did still need them to do some things, and then we had to hire more. It was just a bit of a mess. But yeah, so I've completely wandered off the point. My job was easy to do from home because I could just log onto the database. But for the people that I was managing, it was much trickier.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are you normally, when you were doing the work in the office, is it sort of an open plan office? Is it like, are you at little cubicles? I mean, is it like a talky collegiate environment, or is it everyone just sort of, heads down looking at a terminal and tapping away?
It definitely the second one. It's a big open, or it was a big open plan office with like 200 odd of us sitting in silence, typing away, not talking to each other. Yeah, headphones on, lots of podcasts happening. Yeah, and we tried to work collaboratively, but because each clinical trial is quite different, you end up just kind of working on your trial and speaking to the one other person who kind of understands what's going on. Yeah, so working from home probably got us talking to each other a bit more than we would have otherwise.
That was going to be my next question. I was going to say, did that make you all kind of chat a bit more once you were out of the office? I mean, is this kind of like, oh, nobody's here now, I want to talk to them?
I think like socially, it was a lot harder. But in terms of work-wise, if I had a question for someone, I had to get in touch with them. I couldn't just wait for them to want to pass my desk, and maybe I'd catch them in the coffee room or something.
Yeah.
So it did spark some more conversations that way, or a lot of emails, to be honest. A lot of vague, confused emails going, I've sort of got this problem and I don't really know what's going on. Have you seen this before? Could you give me a hand?
So what were you all on, like Teams or an equivalent of like internal chats?
Yeah, we'd just started. Well, I think it was a bit of an internal pilot going on whether we should use Teams. And then lockdown happened, and then we were all using Teams. And
discussion over, it's happening now.
Yeah. And it, like, we could not work without it now. It's a massive part of the job.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll jump straight into Brexit, unless you want to add anything particular, sort of COVID-wise with regards to the other roles.
Well, the celebrancy didn't come around until more recently. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen during lockdown. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about gathering with groups of strangers, and I don't think the government would have been on my side with me doing that either. I suppose with the TransLeeds stuff, that was difficult because a lot of our like our support groups all moved online, and people don't feel as comfortable sharing. In our experience anyway, they turned more into social chats than support groups, which is fine. That's what people needed and that's what people were comfortable doing. But yeah, it was definitely different. And now that we can do things in person again, it's kind of seeing, this is what it used to be like. And obviously there is a huge amount of isolation for everyone during lockdown. And for maybe the trans community in particular, maybe actually every community had its own lockdown related issues. But yeah, it was a tough time all around.
What about sort of the digital exclusion kind of side of that? I mean, did you feel, I mean, was it just sort of you discovered all of a sudden, we can only reach sort of so much percentage of our normal members?
I mean, yeah, definitely. Yeah. For lots of different reasons. Obviously, there's, some people just didn't have the technology to dial into a Zoom meeting or join in a Facebook chat or whatever it was we were doing. Other people, had the technology but couldn't really use it. And then lots of people, myself included, to be honest, just didn't like using digital options. Like, I really like going to our in-person support groups and social events and stuff. And I hated going to the online ones. I'd spend 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day staring at my own face at work in, Zoom calls and Teams calls. And then I'd go home and have to do another couple of hours of staring at my own face. And I just hated it. And then the vast majority of the stuff we used to do, well, maybe not the vast majority, but a lot of it, we just couldn't do. So like, we couldn't go for picnics. We couldn't go for sports events. We couldn't go, people would normally have been going to like in-person appointments and things where they might want a TransLeeds advocate to come with them. But when everything turned to phone appointments or was just cancelled, it made it much trickier for us to support people in kind of the advocacy side of things as well. So definitely a lot of barriers. Yeah.
Has that kind of improved now? Now we're opening up again?
I think so. Yeah. We've got, to be honest, I think it's given us a good reminder of how important some of these things are. So now that we're doing things again, we're not just doing social events because they're a laugh. We're doing social events because we remember what it was like when we didn't have them and it was not good. So like, yeah, we will put karaoke evenings on, or we'll go swimming, or we'll have, we've got a couple of picnics planned over summer. And it feels a lot more valuable and urgent, I guess, compared to how it has in the past.
Yeah. Like it was, here's just a nice thing we're doing, but it's like, actually, it's really valuable to do something nice and, essentially like team building, like community building.
Yeah, because for some people, for most people, this isn't the case, but for some people, the only time they get to just relax and be themselves and act the way they actually want to act is when they come to our events. Yeah. So I don't, they had that taken off them for a couple of years, and I don't ever want to see them stuck without that again.
Yeah.
Plus, I get to go to some picnics, and who doesn't want that?
Yeah, bonus. Okay, so sorry, we're still on the rubbishy questions at the moment. So the next question is Brexit. So have you noticed any change in your work, in any of your roles, since we have Brexited?
There has been an impact on clinical trials, obviously. The biggest kind of pain in the bum was just figuring out how we were going to get drugs into the country. Like, luckily, the trials I was working on over Brexit weren't particularly affected. We weren't using drugs that were coming in from Europe. So we were kind of a bit insulated against that. But yeah, that was definitely a big problem. And figuring out how the legislation was going to work. Obviously, trials are really heavily regulated, and a lot of the legislation was European. So I might be wrong, but I think it's still the case that the UK legislation is just post Brexit. We just copied what Europe had and did a control F and replaced everything that said Europe with just UK for a lot of this stuff. That will probably change in the future, but it's not changed yet massively. But I am kind of looking at trials from a data point of view. So probably if you were speaking to someone who was involved in like contract negotiations and actually, ordering drugs and shipping them to places, they'd probably be like, no, actually this Brexit was massively terrible.
So I use climate change as kind of a good way of representing the kind of broader everything's falling apart. So, like all the other kind of life support indicators and so on that aren't reading very well at the moment. So in terms of climate change, is there anything that you can do in your work or anything you are doing in your work? Or is that not on the radar as something that you can be concerned about work-wise? And if it is something that's actively part of your work, what kind of things are you doing in that regard?
I suppose from the kind of data management side of things, probably one of the benefits, not that there are many, but one of the very, very thin silver linings on COVID is that we are using a hell of a lot less paper now, but probably more electricity. So I don't know if that actually, like, the trees are happier, but the CO2 levels are not as good. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's one thing. There's a lot less paper, postage, waste. Not as much stuff's being shredded as used to be shredded. Other than that, I don't think there's much from that one of my many jobs. With the celebrancy, I'd be quite interested to see if I could do some sort of ritual around conservation or something like that. I had a conversation last night actually with a friend, and we've decided we're going to try and get involved in curlew conservation. They're these birds that are
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think they're some sort of endangered. I think they might be near threatened rather than fully threatened. I can't remember the scale. But he wants to get involved in preserving their habitat. And because my degree was in zoology and I worked with birds, he sort of roped me into that. And it would be nice to bring something ritualistic to that as well. So we're not just going, to be honest, I don't know exactly what that conservation work will look like yet, because it was one conversation last night, but I imagine it'll be something like going out and doing ringing of, young birds to see if they're coming back to the same habitats to breed, or pulling up trees to make sure that the meadows are stay meadows for these birds to breed in. It would be nice to have a ritualistic aspect to that. So we're not just sort of on autopilot going and doing these tasks, but we're actually taking the moment to appreciate, like, reminding ourselves why we're doing it, and having the space to think about it. But again, this is very much like, I'm just making this up as I go.
Yeah, but that's all the seeds of an idea, isn't it? That's all where it starts, just making it up as you go.
Yeah.
Make it till you make it. Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of avenues you can go down, but you know, you kind of, yeah, celebrating it's like you'd have to kind of focus on the regenerative aspect of nature to celebrate, wouldn't you? Really, the sort of, you know, things are coming back and things can renew and get better and can develop and change and so on, rather than, you know, everything's dying and it's on fire.
Yeah. I, I try to think about the fact that the world is ending in a kind of cyclical way. Like things are born, they get old, they die, and new things are born. I've been explaining to my toddler today the circle of life because he started getting interested in death and what is death, and teaching him that, like, yes, things die, but then that feeds other things. And so, like, yeah, we're destroying the planet and it's bad, but eventually things will get better again, whether it's because we make the change or whether it's because we make ourselves extinct and the planet, you know, doesn't care and just continues planeting.
Okay, so hopefully this is a more hopeful and a brighter question. So if there was a UBI, would you still be doing what you do now? I mean, first of all, would you still work? Second of all, would you still be doing what you do now? And I suppose the third element of that is, how do you think it would affect what you do now?
That's a really good question. I mean, the voluntary work, yes, definitely. The celebrancy, yes, but I might charge a lot less or potentially not even charge at all for it. Because that, I don't know, that's something I'm doing because I find it really valuable. If I didn't have to generate profit, I wouldn't. And then the data management, I mean, I really like it, but would I still do it if I didn't have to pay the mortgage? I'd probably work a lot less. I don't think I'd be doing it full. I mean, I'd be doing the TransLeeds stuff full time.
Is it just sort of process? Is it like, you don't have to cram. It's not like we need to process this much data before X, or is it a constant kind of, you know, this is going to get done when it gets done and you just kind of chip away at it? Is it like, what's the rate of work and the rate of flow for you?
So most of my job is kind of oversight of other people actually dealing with the data day to day. Generally, it's a steady flow. You know, we get data back, you know, every day, and it gets processed and cleaned. And then when certain milestones are coming up, we will have a few weeks of like, okay, we need to double check X amount of forms or you know, X amount of data items. So it's a little bit of both, but generally it's fairly steady.
Yeah. So you could realistically sort of drop it down to like 4 days, 2 days, whatever, and it wouldn't really, you know, that would be feasible in itself. It's not something like, well, you couldn't do this because you just need to like plow through all the time and there's always extra overtime.
Yeah, no. I work on a few different trials, so I could just hand some trials off to someone else and then, you know, I'd need to work a lot less. Yeah, which would be fantastic. I wish I could do that.
I mean, I'm going to extend this out, obviously, with your experience. I mean, thinking with your TransLeeds hat on for this, I mean, in terms of your members and the people that you support, would UBI help?
Yes. Immensely, yes.
Yeah,
like
sort of uncategorically, yes.
yeah. How do we get this to happen? Like, who do I need to write to? Like, it would be amazing if there was a system in place that meant that everyone who needed food could buy food. Because that's another thing we do is we like take food bank parcels out to people. if we didn't need to do that because they could afford food, that would be amazing. If everyone who needed a home could get a home, that would take a massive amount of work off our shoulders. If people that are having to access private healthcare because the NHS system is segregated for trans people and is absolutely appalling, if they could afford just a little bit every month to access private healthcare instead, I mean, that would increase the whole community's quality of life. Like, I can't even describe how much. A huge amount.
And it's not special treatment because it's universal. So it's like, it's not like, oh, we're getting a special handout. It's like everybody's getting a basic of like, you know, this is what you get at a basic, and then from there up to you.
Yeah. I think, it would just be for everyone. How could anyone be against this idea? It would be good for all of us.
Yep. As someone with, you know, you've got these three roles and the three hats for them. Like, is that a bit much? Does it give you the variety that you need? Does it also, do you think it gives you, you know, working in those different roles, do you think it gives you different insight skills that kind of complement each other that you can kind of bring into the other roles? Like, what do you think about having three roles?
The answer to is it a bit much is yes, it's a bit much. Probably a bit of an understatement, to be honest. It's a lot. I don't really ever switch off. I had some surgery back in October, and the first thing I did when I came round from the anaesthetic, while my husband was like trying to get me to take a sip of water and asking me how I was I picked up my phone. I saw I had a message about work, and I responded to that message because I was like, well, if I don't do it now, I'm just going to have to do it later, and I'll have 100 other things to do then. So I was still pretty loopy from the anaesthetic, so I'm glad I didn't say anything too weird. But yeah, it is a lot. It's 24/7. And I've forgotten the other half of the question.
Yeah, so just how the roles sort of interact with each other. Did they give you any insight into the other roles from doing the other roles?
Yes, definitely. I think I was expecting that my big job, my data manager job, would be giving me all of the experience that I needed for the other two. But it's actually very much the other way around. I think the TransLeeds stuff, in particular, has given me a load of skills that I wouldn't have had otherwise that I can then bring into the other roles. Like, obviously doing support for people has kind of forced me to get better at listening and holding space for people, and kind of working on, I don't know how to describe it. I guess like empathetic listening without getting embroiled in other people's stuff, which obviously for the celebrancy is really useful, to be able to sit and listen and hold space for people without going home and being upset about whatever they were upset about. And yeah, I thought that I did a lot of project management in my day job, but actually the project management for TransLeeds is full on hardcore project management. And those skills have been really useful in my day job.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much you want to indulge this, but if you think of like kind of the data side would be kind of thought of as being very rational. And then obviously the kind of support side, very kind of emotive, and because you're supportive, it's more nurturing, more caring activity, more emotional intelligence. So it's like, you know, you've got these two gendered emotional roles. I just think that's kind of interesting. And then you're mashing them together.
That's a really good point, actually. I've not really thought about that, but it's weird how, I don't know whether this is too personal, but it's weird how before I transitioned, so obviously I'm a guy, but I was not raised as a guy. Before I transitioned, I was leaning heavily into the more masculine kind of data analytics side of things. And then when I realized I was a guy, suddenly I was open to all of the more traditionally considered feminine stuff. Like, yeah, I will go and sit with people and hold their hands while they cry and talk about emotions and stuff like that. Yeah, that had not occurred to me before, but that's really interesting.
Those are the kind of reactions that I want to get. I think it's been a really good interview when you get to a point where someone's like, I didn't think of that. So I was just me sort of indulging my own random thoughts there. Social media. Let's get back to social media. So this is mainly about kind of the return on investment of the energy of social media. It's kind of, no matter what kind of role you're doing, it's kind of creeping into your work and taking up more and more of people's time. Whether that's, a kind of social media strategy that says how you behave online and how you're presenting and your information when you're representing such and such a company or employed by such and such a company. So for yourself and in the roles that you're doing, how much time do you have to spend on social media? And do you think that time is usefully spent on social media? Like, does it give the investment back in terms of the time that you put into it?
I think I've actually got the whole spectrum across the 3 different jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I've got all the different extremes. With the data management for the clinical trials, the way the trials are set up is there's usually there's always a chief investigator who will be a academic or an oncologist or whatever, some sort of doctor or academic. And they are usually quite big on having social media set up for the trials themselves, because they want to get their own research out there and make themselves look more important, which is, I also would like to look important. I'm not disparaging that. But, myself and my colleagues are tasked with dealing with the social media, and it's completely pointless from our point of view. It's all we're doing is retweeting things other people have said about the research. And it feels like a massive waste of time. But we could use that social media to reach out to our participants, to give them updates on how the trial's going and to feed back to them, this is what we're actually doing with the information you've given us, and this is what we're finding out. And that would be really worthwhile. But certainly in the trials I work on, that hasn't been the case. And it's something I've been pushing quite heavily for actually at work, is to feed back to our participants a hell of a lot better than we do, because a lot of the time people will, they'll get this horrible diagnosis, then they'll be offered to join this clinical trial to test out this drug, and they will come to additional appointments and they will literally give us their blood and, biopsies and things. And then they finish the trial and they go back to their lives and they never find out what happened. Yeah. So as always, these things take an incredibly long time. But since before the pandemic, I've been pushing for us to change that and to actually tell people what we've done, what we found out, and thank them properly. And I think social media will be a really good way to do that. But we're just not utilizing it at the moment. So I guess with that particular hat on, social media, I spend a little bit of time on it and it feels like time wasted. But at the other end of the spectrum, for TransLeeds, social media is a massive, massive thing. We have our chairperson is also our social media officer. And he puts a huge amount of effort into making sure that people can find us when they need to be able to find us. And we're being public about what we're doing without being too public and getting the wrong kind of
attention.
Yeah. And we have, I'm going to be vague about what they are, but we have private online groups where
Mhm.
people can join, even if they don't want to come to in-person things.
Mhm.
And I spend a lot of time in those groups, just like seeing what people are doing, seeing what people would be interested in us doing, and just having a bit of a vibe check of the community.
Mhm.
Like, that's probably a couple of hours every day that I spend just like seeing what people are saying and contributing where I can. We've had a bit of the past couple of weeks, I don't know what's going on, but everyone seems to be quite down, and there's a lot of people feeling quite depressed, I guess.
Mm.
And so I'm trying to pop up on social media, every day with a good news story or a kind of something distracting and uplifting. So yeah, I think that is really valuable,
Mm.
both for the people that, we're working with and for the people that don't know that they need us yet
Mm.
to find out that we are out there and we are doing stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. And then with the third hat on with the celebrancy, I should be using social media a lot more, but I'm lazy. Um, I,
I wouldn't say you're lazy from what you've said.
I'm limited on time.
Yeah, limited capacity. Yeah.
So I generally rely on word of mouth for people to find out about what I'm doing. But I have had people who've seen my Facebook page or seen, I was going to say seen the Twitter. I don't think I've actually tweeted anything, but have heard about me on social media and have come to me. Although a lot of the time that's from me saying something in a Facebook group and someone going, "Oh, I didn't know that was something people did. Can I message you about that?"
Mm.
Rather than me actually just like posting on my own page.
Mm.
But yeah, if I wanted to do that job full time, I'd have to dedicate a lot of time to social media. But when it's just a couple of weekends here and there, I'm happy to not have to do that extra work.
Yeah. If you could change any three things about your work, so any three things, and this is for all three roles, what would they be?
Ooh. If I could change anything, I think in my day job, in the data management, I'd want a much lower workload and higher wage.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just me wanting more money, but we are properly underpaid where I work at the moment, like significantly compared to other places. And since COVID, our workloads have just gone up and up and up.
Mm.
And it's absolutely unmanageable at the moment. So those two things I think would be very good changes. And then a third change, I guess now we're all working from home, as much as I don't want to go back into the office, I don't really have any social interaction with the people I work with anymore. We literally just get in touch with each other for work.
Mm.
So it would be nice to have time where you're just being people rather than being colleagues. That wasn't a really kind of orchestrated, like online Zoom coffee morning, which we do, and they're awful and they don't work. So yeah, I think those are the things that change there.
What about with the other roles?
With the celebrancy, I don't think there's much I would change, to be honest. Other than maybe not to benefit me, but just generally, I'd want more people to be interested in that kind of work and interested in, observing the rituals of life a bit more formally, just because I think it's good and healthy. But that's just me. With TransLeeds, if I could wave a magic wand, I would get us some permanent funding that would allow us to employ staff rather than relying on the goodwill of the community. And I'd get us a permanent residence or permanent offices, because at the moment, everything lives in my spare room. And when there are places that do allow us to use rooms for free, but it would be nice to have an office where all of our stuff is and that we can access 24/7. And to be honest, it would be nice if we had shared premises with other LGBT charities in Leeds. It's something that gets talked about a lot in the community and has never happened, but that would be really nice so that we can keep those links and like work collaboratively, so we're not all just doing our own things and all stressing ourselves out when we could be working together and sharing the workload. I think that's kind of it in terms of things I'd change. I just want to make it a bit easier for us to do our work. Oh, I'd have a full-time counsellor employed as well, because access to good mental health care is impossible for anyone. And the trans community in particular needs, we have a lot of trauma because we get put through a lot of bad experiences, much like most other minorities, I'd imagine. So if we could provide access to proper, good quality mental health care, that would probably solve a lot of other problems as well. So if anyone's listening and they have millions of pounds to give away, like, give me a phone call.
Yeah. I mean, I will just say a quick thing on, I suppose the work-life balance and well-being and all of that kind of stuff. Again, I mean, you say in yourself that you're kind of doing loads and loads of hours and find it difficult to switch off. I mean, I suppose with the activities that you do with TransLeeds and the social activities, and then with the celebrancy as well, I mean, there's an element where that is, I'm guessing that doesn't feel so much like work. So it does potentially give you that kind of downtime, that chance to kind of decompress. I mean, do you work too much, do you think? Or do you think you've got the balance about right for yourself?
I definitely work too much. Definitely. And I have to be really strict with myself because, I also have a husband and a 3-year-old, and I'm not in the house very often, or I'm not in the house at the same time as them very often. So I have to be strict with myself to be like, just because something needs doing, doesn't mean that I have to do it, and doesn't mean that, sometimes things just won't get done because I don't want to burn myself out. And then everything falls apart rather than just, one thing doesn't happen versus nothing happens for a couple of months because I've worn myself out. Yeah. But yeah, I don't really have a work-life balance. I just have work, and occasionally I sit down and watch an episode or something on telly.
Yeah, just throw it open to you. Sort of, is there any not covered that you want to talk about that, that you want to mention or that we want to have a look at? So,
anyone asks me to talk, even at a bus stop, I'll start telling them about TransLeeds and how great we are and the things we do for everyone. So if anyone is interested in TransLeeds, check out our website. We do support and social stuff and advocacy and swimming, and we do training for other organisations as well. That's our main source of income. So if anyone wants any trans awareness training or tailored training, get in touch with us. Contact@transleeds.org. But that's just my little bit of kind of promoing us.
And I suppose that, that's not just, I suppose you support people who aren't, you support the families of trans people as well, like the people that are going through transitions and families coping with that transition in whatever ways they do, I would imagine. And can you support workplaces as well in a similar fashion?
Yeah, definitely. I usually recommend workplaces get in touch with us for training, unless there is a specific individual who's coming out. Usually the way that works is that individual will come to us and say, my workplace are being a little bit dodgy. Can you do some advocacy for me? And then we'd go in as like a neutral third party and say, like, here's how things could work better. Not in a combative way, just in a kind of, we're here to help everyone out kind of way. But if there are workplaces that want to be proactive and want to get us in to help them with that before there's a problem, then like, yeah, please, that's what we want. We want to be solving problems before people are affected. So yeah, basically, if anyone wants to know anything about anything trans related, just email us because, you know, we'll be able to either help ourselves or let you know who else is out there to help.
Thank you again to Tom for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests. And thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. And of course, most of all, thanks to you, my dear listener. Come back next week to hear me speak to a Loiner author. I'm going to close out this week with some Studs Terkel. Work is about a search for daily meaning as well as daily bread, for recognition as well as cash, for astonishment rather than torpor. In short, for a sort of life rather than a Monday through Friday sort of dying. Okay, that's me. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. If you're listening to this, I assume you have some connection to Leeds, like living here or being from here. If you're such a person in Leeds or from Leeds and you haven't done your recording for working hours yet, then don't wait. Email me now, right now. Quick, get a pen. workinghoursPod@western-studios.com. If you fancy being my guest, put guest in the subject line of your email and add a short bio in the message. Stick in some suggestions of your availability and I'll send you a release form and a Zoom invite. If you'd like to be on working hours, I will need a 2-hour window for us to record in. I can record in your work time or during your downtime. I have been recording interviews for working hours for over a year on Zoom, but I can also record offline. You can appear on working hours anonymously, or you can promote yourself and or your company or brand. Cleaner or owner, what is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Be a part of local history, have your voice heard, share your wisdom, give us the inside skinny. This is your show, Leeds, and it's all about what you make of yourself. Do you know what you're doing? If you do, then come and tell me all about it. Come on working hours, even if you don't know what you're doing. I certainly don't. Email me right now. Quick, get a pen. workinghoursPod@western-studios.com. If you're allowed to do that, that is. If you're not allowed to do that, then tell me why. If you and your business aren't ashamed of what you do, then let's hear all about it. What good are you doing the rest of us? Are you socially useful? Am I? Is this? Send your feedback, questions, comments, and queries right now to workinghoursPod@western-studios.com. What is happening, Leeds? Find out by following this show on Twitter @WorkingHours3 and on Instagram @WorkingHoursPodLeeds to find out when new episodes are going to be released. Or just use the hashtag #WorkingHoursPodLeeds on either of those sites to find me. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds. I'm also on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/Simon-Treen. Treen is TREEN. Or you can go to my company page, which is linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. If you want to make a podcast in Leeds, whether it's for a cause, a publicity campaign, a product promotion, or your own passion project, then get in touch with me. Western Studios for support, advice, and guidance on anything podcasts. At Western Studios, you work with a real life loiner who is actually in Leeds, who you can actually work with on making podcast content. So don't wade through articles and videos and podcasts about how to make podcasts. Just get on with it. Western Studios can make your podcast with you or even for you. Western Studios can take on your podcast's boring, time-consuming, and painful admin, recording, editing, transcription, whatever. Tell me about it. I feel your pain. For a charge, I'll share it. Writers, what are you doing with your lives? Hopefully you're writing. Well, I know there are listeners out there who want to hear great original writing performed as audio content and made in Leeds. How do I know this? Because I'm one of them. Help me make Muck for Brass, a series of short stories, poems, performers, whatever, all published as podcast content. Is your work arty, salacious, pulpy, strange? Good. I want to make it a podcast. I get practice making the show, and you get a finished, performed, and published version of your writing. Businesses, campaigns, brands, got an inkling that you'd like a podcast but don't know where to start? Hit me up at Make My Podcast at western-studios.com and we'll start making your podcast straight away. The first hour of arranged consultation and pre-production time is free. So what do you have to lose? And what are you waiting for? Save yourself the hassle and the headache and make your podcast with a Leeds-based, in real life, podcast producer, that's me, Western Studios Leeds. Once again, please let Working Hours get big and strong by joining its Patreon. Support Working Hours by becoming a champion on Patreon for £1 a month. You can inspire me and motivate me with a membership and maybe one day even be helping to cover all my costs. You can chat to me there and see me do a monthly live stream where, again, you can chat to me all about the show and, God, do I need to find someone to actively share this project with? Go to patreon.com/working hours pod right now and sign up, please. And or go to Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/working hours and join me there for £1 a month and get access to the Working Hours Discord and chat to me there. I will be putting up additional material on Ko-fi once there are any members there. Please do remember to like, share, follow, and subscribe to this show. Every little bit helps. Tell your gran, tell your housekeeper, tell your gardener, tell your parole officer, tell your boss, tell Leeds, and I'll see thee next time, our kid. Working Hours is presented, edited, and recorded by Simon Treem for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.